The year was 2157, and Earth had finally reached beyond its own solar system. Small colonies existed on Mars and Europa, and the United Earth Defense Force kept a modest fleet of warships orbiting the planet. These ships were built to destroy asteroids and chase away pirates, nothing more. Humanity believed it was alone in the universe, still searching for any sign of intelligent life among the stars. Commander Han Jiwoo stood on the bridge of Sentinel-7, an orbital defense station that circled Earth like a silent guardian. He was reviewing routine patrol reports when the alarms began screaming. 3 massive objects had appeared beyond Jupiter, emerging from nowhere like ghosts materializing in empty space. The sensors couldn't explain how they arrived. One moment there was nothing, the next moment there were 3 ships larger than anything humanity had ever built. Dr. Kong Myri was in her laboratory at the UN First Contact Division when the emergency alert reached her computer. She had spent 15 years preparing for this moment, studying theoretical xenobiology and drafting first contact protocols. Now her hands shook as she pulled up the sensor data. The ships were real. They were here. And they were moving toward Earth. Captain Lee Doyen commanded the UEDF destroyer Indomitable, stationed near the lunar shipyards. He watched the unknown vessels on his screen and felt his stomach tighten. His ship carried nuclear missiles and railguns, weapons designed to fight other human ships. Against these enormous alien vessels, he wasn't sure if his weapons would even scratch the paint. The aliens didn't wait long to make their intentions clear. 12 hours after their arrival, every communication device on Earth, Mars, and the orbital stations received the same broadcast. The message came in perfect Korean, English, Mandarin, and 50 other human languages. A face appeared on screens across human civilization, a being with 4 eyes and pale blue skin that seemed to shimmer in the light. "I am Overlord Thravik of the Valkyrie Dominion," the alien said, its voice cold and mechanical. "Your species has been detected and evaluated. The Valkyrie Dominion has conquered 47 star systems and brought order to countless primitive civilizations. You will now join the Dominion as subjects. You have 72 hours to surrender all military assets and submit to Valkyrie governance. Refuse, and we will demonstrate why resistance is futile. This is not a negotiation. This is inevitability." The broadcast ended, leaving humanity in stunned silence. Within minutes, the UN Security Council convened an emergency session. Ambassador Park Soo-jin sat at the table, listening to world leaders argue about the proper response. Some wanted to surrender immediately, believing that survival mattered more than pride. Others demanded resistance, refusing to become slaves to an alien empire. The debate raged for hours while the clock counted down. Commander Han Jiwoo didn't wait for politicians to make decisions. He began analyzing every bit of data the sensors had collected about the Valkyrie ships. He studied their movement patterns, their energy signatures, the way they positioned themselves in space. Something bothered him. The aliens were powerful, yes, but they moved with arrogance. Their formation was defensive but predictable. They acted like predators who had never encountered prey that fought back. Dr. Kong Myri received samples of the Valkyrie broadcast signal and began breaking it down. Hidden in the transmission were data packets, technical information about the Valkyrie ships and their empire. It seemed the aliens wanted humanity to understand exactly how outmatched they were. But Myri saw something else in the data. The Valkyrie had conquered many worlds, but always through the same method. Arrive, threaten, overwhelm with superior numbers, and absorb the defeated civilization. They had never fought a prolonged war. They had never needed to adapt. Captain Lee Doyen called his crew together in the mess hall of the Indomitable. Most of them were young, many had never seen combat. He looked at their faces and saw fear mixed with determination. "The politicians are still talking," he told them. "But we need to be ready. If Earth decides to fight, we'll be the first line of defense. Check your equipment. Run combat drills. And, remember, we're not just fighting for ourselves. We're fighting for every human being who ever lived and every human being who will ever be born. The 72 hours passed slowly. Ambassador Park Soo-jin led a delegation that tried to negotiate with the Valkyrie. She proposed trade agreements, cultural exchanges, peaceful coexistence. Overlord Thravik listened with what might have been amusement. You misunderstand your position, he told her. The Dominion does not negotiate with primitives. We have given you a choice. Submit or perish. These are your only options. Commander Han Jaiwoo presented his analysis to the UEDF command. They're confident because they've never lost, he explained. Every species they've encountered has either surrendered or been crushed quickly. They rely on overwhelming force, not tactical innovation. If we fight smart instead of fighting fair, we might have a chance. It won't be pretty, and it won't be honorable, but we might survive. The UN Security Council took a final vote. The decision was close, but ultimately clear. Humanity would not surrender. Earth would fight. Ambassador Park Soo-jin delivered the response personally, broadcasting directly to the Valkyrie flagship. We reject your demands, she said, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. Humanity has fought for freedom throughout our entire history. We won't stop now. Leave our solar system peacefully, or face the consequences. Overlord Thravik's response was immediate and brutal. So be it. You will serve as an example to other primitive species. Resistance brings only suffering. The Valkyrie Dominion will show no mercy. The 3 Valkyrie warships began moving toward Earth, accelerating with technology that made human engines look like children's toys. Behind them, more ships appeared from hyperspace. The Vanguard was just the beginning. 30 Valkyrie vessels entered the solar system, weapons charging, shields glowing with deadly energy. They expected token resistance, a few brave ships making futile gestures before the inevitable capitulation. They expected fear and surrender. What they got instead would change the galaxy forever. Captain Lee Doyen ordered the Indomitable to battle stations. Commander Han Jaiwoo activated defense protocols across every human station and ship. Dr. Kong Myri sealed her laboratory and began working on contingency plans that terrified her. And Ambassador Park Soo-jin watched the approaching fleet with tears in her eyes, knowing that billions might die in the coming days. The Valkyrie expected Earth to yield. They were about to learn that humanity had spent 10,000 years perfecting one skill above all others. The art of war. The Valkyrie fleet approached with absolute confidence. Overlord Thravik watched from his command throne as 30 warships moved through space like hunting predators. In his long career, he had overseen 12 planetary conquests. Each one had ended the same way. The primitives would launch their crude weapons, realize how futile resistance was, and beg for mercy. He expected this encounter to follow the same pattern. Captain Lee Doyen stood on the bridge of the Indomitable, watching the enemy approach. His fleet consisted of 12 destroyers, 8 frigates, and a handful of patrol craft. Against 30 Valkyrie warships, the numbers looked hopeless. But Doyen had spent the last 72 hours studying every piece of intelligence Commander Han Jaiwoo had gathered. He had a plan. It was insane, but it might work. The battle began near lunar orbit. The Valkyrie ships opened fire first, launching bright purple energy beams that could slice through a human ship like paper. 3 UEDF frigates exploded in the first volley, their crews dead before they knew what hit them. The Valkyrie expected the remaining human ships to scatter and flee. Instead, the human fleet accelerated directly toward the enemy. Doyen implemented the first part of his strategy. He had spent 2 days converting civilian mining ships into weapons. Each mining vessel now carried nuclear warheads in their cargo holds and volunteer crews who knew they weren't coming back. The mining ships, looking harmless and crippled, drifted toward the Valkyrie formation broadcasting distress signals. When the Valkyrie ships moved to investigate these apparent disabled vessels, the mining ships detonated. 5 Valkyrie warships vanished in nuclear fire. The explosions were so bright they could be seen from Earth with the naked eye. Overlord Thravik stared at his displays in shock. No primitive species had ever destroyed Valkyrie ships before. Not one. Not ever. And, these humans had just eliminated 5 vessels in a single attack. Commander Han Jaiwu watched the battle from Sentinel-7 and began implementing the second phase. Thousands of small drones, originally designed for mining operations, launched from hidden positions throughout the asteroid belt. Each drone carried a simple explosive charge and basic guidance systems. Individually, they were harmless. But, Jaiwu had launched 12,000 of them, and they swarmed the Valkyrie fleet like angry insects. The Valkyrie point defense system struggled to track so many small targets. The drones crashed into shields, sensors, and weapon ports. Most did minimal damage, but the cumulative effect was devastating. Valkyrie ships found their sensors blinded, their shields fluctuating, their weapons temporarily offline. They were still functional, but they were no longer invincible. Dr. Kong Myri worked frantically in her laboratory, analyzing the data streaming back from the battle. Every time a Valkyrie weapon fired, her computers recorded the energy signature. Every time a Valkyrie shield deflected an attack, she learned more about their defensive capabilities. She was building a profile of Valkyrie technology, looking for weaknesses. And she was finding them. Captain Lee Doyen pushed the Indomitable deeper into the Valkyrie formation. His ship took hit after hit, armor melting under alien weapons. But, he kept moving forward, heading directly for the Valkyrie flagship. His crew knew what he planned to do. They had all volunteered. When the Indomitable's weapons fell silent and its engines began to fail, Doyen opened a channel to all human forces. "We don't yield," he said simply. "We don't break. We burn." The Indomitable rammed the Valkyrie flagship at full speed. The human destroyer was smaller, weaker, built with inferior technology. But, it was moving fast and it carried 3 nuclear warheads in its nose. The impact crippled the flagship's main engines and destroyed its primary weapons array. Captain Lee Doyen and his entire crew died instantly. But, their sacrifice showed every human in the solar system that the aliens could bleed. Overlord Thravik abandoned his damaged flagship, transferring to another vessel. He was no longer confident. He was angry. These primitives had humiliated him. They had destroyed 6 Valkyrie ships and damaged his personal flagship. This would not stand. He ordered his fleet to target the lunar colonies, civilian habitats housing 20,000 humans. If the human military wouldn't surrender, he would teach them the price of resistance. The bombardment of Luna lasted 3 hours. Valkyrie weapons turned entire colony domes into craters. Men, women, and children died by the thousands. Commander Han Jaiwu watched helplessly from Sentinel-7, unable to stop the slaughter. When the Valkyrie finally ceased fire, 20,000 civilians were dead. The lunar surface was covered in ruins. But, Overlord Thravik had made a critical mistake. He had assumed that killing civilians would break human morale. He didn't understand human psychology. He didn't know human history. Every person on Earth, Mars, and the orbital stations saw the footage of the Luna massacre. And, instead of breaking their will to fight, it united them in rage. Ambassador Park Sujin stood before the UN Security Council with tears streaming down her face. "No more negotiations," she said. "No more mercy. They came to our home. They murdered our children. We end them. All of them." The vote was unanimous. Earth activated Protocol Scorched Earth, a military doctrine that removed all ethical constraints on warfare. Every weapon humanity had ever designed, every tactic humanity had ever considered too brutal, every strategy humanity had developed through 10,000 years of warfare against itself, all of it was now authorized for use against the Valkyrie. Commander Han Jaiwu received the authorization codes and felt something cold settle in his chest. He had spent his career trying to prevent wars, trying to find peaceful solutions to conflicts. Now he was being asked to wage total war against an alien species. He looked at the images of dead children in the lunar colonies and made his decision. He would do whatever it took to protect humanity. Dr. Kong Myri received a different kind of authorization. The UN gave her permission to develop biological weapons targeting Valkyrie physiology. She had always believed such weapons were immoral, a line that should never be crossed. But, she remembered the faces of her colleagues who had been stationed on Luna. She remembered the children who would never grow up. She began her work. The Valkyrie fleet regrouped, expecting the humans to finally surrender after witnessing the consequences of resistance. Instead, the human attacks intensified. UEDF ships stopped trying to fight honorably. They used Valkyrie distress signals to lure rescue ships into ambushes. They weaponized asteroids, accelerating them to relativistic speeds and sending them crashing into Valkyrie vessels. They deployed autonomous war machines that hunted Valkyrie ships without hesitation or mercy. Overlord Thravik sent an urgent message to the Valkyrie Dominion's core worlds, requesting immediate reinforcements. Human forces displaying unexpected tactical sophistication and psychological instability. Recommend caution when engaging this species. They fight without regard for conventional military doctrine. But, the message that truly worried the Valkyrie military command was the one that came after. Humans appear willing to sacrifice their own lives without hesitation. They weaponize civilian vessels. They ram ships into our formations. They do not fight to win. They fight to kill, even if it means dying in the process. Request guidance on how to proceed against an enemy that fears death less than defeat. The Valkyrie had conquered 47 star systems, but they had never encountered anything like humanity. They expected primitives. They expected fear. They expected surrender. What they got instead was a species that had spent its entire existence fighting, killing, and perfecting the art of war. The Valkyrie brought devastation to Earth. They were about to discover what devastation really meant. Earth transformed in a matter of weeks. Every factory, every shipyard, every manufacturing facility converted to war production. The automobile plants built missiles. The electronics factories produced guidance systems. The civilian shipyards began constructing warships using revolutionary quick-build techniques that sacrificed elegance for speed. Humanity's industrial capacity, refined through centuries of competition and capitalism, became a weapon unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Admiral Cho Yuna took command of the newly formed Second Fleet. She was a veteran of the Martian independence conflicts, a brutal series of battles that had killed thousands before cooler heads negotiated peace. Now she stood on the bridge of her flagship, watching 30 new destroyers roll out of the orbital yards. They weren't pretty ships. They were built fast and cheap, designed to hurt the enemy before they died. Yuna understood that kind of warfare. She had practiced it against other humans for years. General Kim Tae-hyun prepared Earth's ground forces for the possibility of planetary invasion. He trained soldiers in underground complexes, teaching them guerrilla tactics and urban warfare. Every city became a potential fortress. Every civilian learned how to recognize Valkyrie technology and report enemy movements. Tae-hyun had fought in the Asian coalition wars and understood one crucial truth about warfare. The side that wanted victory more would usually win, regardless of technology or numbers. Specialist Bae Hyun-woo sat in a darkened room surrounded by computer screens, his fingers dancing across keyboards as he waged a different kind of war. He was a cyber warfare expert, one of the best in the UEDF. For 3 weeks, he had been studying captured Valkyrie communication signals, learning their encryption methods, and mapping their network architecture. Now he was ready to strike. With a few keystrokes, he began injecting malicious code into every Valkyrie transmission that passed through human-monitored space. Commander Han Jae-woo implemented tactics that made even hardened military officers uncomfortable. When the Valkyries sent rescue ships to recover survivors from damaged vessels, Jae-woo's forces ambushed them and killed everyone aboard. When Valkyrie commanders tried to negotiate temporary ceasefires to recover their dead, Jiwoo used the pauses to reposition his forces and launch surprise attacks. He weaponized every rule of warfare, twisted every convention, and exploited every moment of Valkyrie hesitation. The Valkyrie Empire had rules for war, standards of conduct developed over 1,000 years of conquest. Han Jiwoo ignored all of them. He didn't fight like a civilized military officer. He fought like a cornered animal with nothing left to lose. And it was working. The Valkyrie casualties mounted daily, not from glorious battles but from ambushes, traps, and suicide attacks they couldn't predict or counter. Dr. Kong Myri made a breakthrough in her laboratory. The Valkyrie biological samples revealed something unexpected. The aliens had never developed strong immune systems or medical resistance protocols. Their empire was so dominant, so powerful, that they had never needed to adapt to biological threats. No conquered species had ever deployed bioweapons against them. Myri began engineering a pathogen specifically designed to target Valkyrie physiology. She didn't create a lethal disease. That would be too quick, too merciful. Instead, she designed something that would cause excruciating pain, debilitating weakness, and psychological terror. The Valkyrie would suffer, and their suffering would spread fear throughout their entire fleet. When she presented her creation to the UN Security Council, the vote was unanimous. Deploy it. Make them hurt. Overlord Thravik, now commanding from a new flagship after his original vessel was destroyed, struggled to understand what was happening. His forces still outnumbered the humans. His technology was still superior. But every day brought new casualties, new horrors, new tactics he had never encountered. The humans didn't fight like any species he had ever conquered. They fought like they wanted to die, as long as they could take Valkyrie soldiers with them. He sent another message to the Dominion's core worlds, this one marked with the highest priority. Human forces display complete disregard for their own survival. They weaponize civilian infrastructure. They deploy autonomous killing machines. They use biological and chemical agents without hesitation. Recommend recategorizing this conquest. These primitives fight like a disease, not an army. They spread chaos and fear more effectively than they deploy conventional weapons. But something else was happening that Overlord Thravik didn't fully understand yet. Specialist Bei Hyanwo's cyber warfare campaign was succeeding beyond anyone's expectations. The malicious code he had injected into Valkyrie networks was spreading through their entire communication system. And, hidden within that code was something more dangerous than any virus. It was footage of humanity's resistance. The Valkyrie Dominion ruled 47 conquered star systems, but ruling and controlling were different things. Many of the subjugated species harbored resentment against their Valkyrie masters. They obeyed because they had no choice, because resistance seemed impossible. But, now they were watching humans fight back. They saw human ships ramming Valkyrie vessels. They saw human soldiers choosing death over surrender. And they began to wonder if resistance might be possible after all. Admiral Cho Yuna led her second fleet on a daring raid against the Valkyrie forward base on Saturn's moon, Titan. The aliens had established supply depots and repair facilities there, believing that distance from Earth would keep them safe. Yuna's fleet made a 6-month journey through hostile space, dodging Valkyrie patrols and conserving fuel. When they arrived at Titan, they attacked without warning. The battle lasted 18 hours. Yuna's ships used nuclear weapons to destroy the orbital defenses, then deployed ground forces to clear the surface installations. General Kim Tae-hyun's soldiers fought in the freezing temperatures of Titan's surface, wearing pressure suits and wielding weapons designed for close-quarters combat. They didn't take prisoners. They didn't accept surrender. They killed every Valkyrie soldier they found, leaving the base a smoking ruin. The psychological impact of the Titan raid exceeded its tactical value. The Valkyrie had believed their rear areas were secure, their supply lines protected. Now they knew nowhere was safe. Human forces could strike anywhere, anytime, without warning. The fear spread through the Valkyrie fleet like a contagion more deadly than anything Dr. Kong Myri had created. But, the Valkyrie Empire was not finished. The Dominion committed its 8th and 9th battle fleets to the Earth theater. Over 300 warships began moving toward human space, carrying enough firepower to sterilize entire planets. Overlord Thravik was replaced by Supreme Commander Forlak, a strategist known for his ruthless efficiency. Forlak had overseen the conquest of 6 star systems, and he had never shown mercy to any species that resisted. Commander Han Jaiwu received intelligence about the approaching fleets and felt his blood run cold. 300 ships. Even with humanity's industrial capacity working at maximum output, they couldn't match those numbers. Earth's defense forces would be overwhelmed in a matter of weeks. Unless they changed the nature of the war entirely. He called a meeting of Earth's military leadership. Admiral Cho Yuna attended via hologram from her flagship near Saturn. General Kim Tae-hyun joined from his command bunker deep beneath the Himalayas. Dr. Kong Myri connected from her sealed laboratory. Specialist Bae Hyun-woo appeared on screen, his face illuminated by the glow of his computer monitors. And, Ambassador Park Soo-jin represented the civilian government, reminding them all that they fought for more than just survival. Han Jaiwu laid out his plan. It was desperate, possibly suicidal, and, definitely insane. But, it was also the only chance humanity had. They would abandon Earth's direct defense and strike at the Valkyrie supply lines across the entire solar system. They would turn every asteroid, every moon, every piece of space debris into a potential weapon. They would force the Valkyrie to commit their entire fleet to Sol system, and, then, they would trigger the trap. It means leaving Earth undefended, Admiral Cho Yuna said quietly. Billions will die while we're attacking their logistics. Billions will die anyway if we lose, Han Jaiwu replied. At least this way, we die making them hurt. The vote was taken. The decision was made. Humanity would gamble everything on one final, desperate strategy. They would turn their home solar system into a killing field, and they would make the Valkyrie pay for every meter of space they conquered. The human war machine wasn't just building weapons anymore. It was becoming one. Supreme Commander Forlak arrived in Sol system with 300 warships and absolute confidence. He had studied humanity's resistance and identified what he considered their critical weakness. Humans were emotional creatures who valued individual lives. They would break when forced to watch their homeworld burn. He planned to make Earth uninhabitable, to show all conquered species what happened to those who resisted the Valkyrie dominion. Operation Burning Sky began at dawn over the Pacific Ocean. Valkyrie kinetic weapons, massive tungsten rods accelerated to orbital velocities, began raining down on Earth's major cities. Tokyo vanished in an instant, replaced by a crater 3 kilometers wide. Moscow, London, Cairo, Sao Paulo, each metropolis targeted and destroyed with surgical precision. The bombardment wasn't designed to kill everyone immediately. It was designed to create maximum suffering and terror. Commander Han Jaiwu, now promoted to Fleet Admiral, watched his homeworld burn from the command deck of his flagship. Every instinct screamed at him to turn his fleet around and defend Earth. But, he had made his choice. The entire human fleet, every warship that could still fly, was scattered across the outer solar system conducting guerrilla operations against Valkyrie supply lines. They were leaving Earth defenseless deliberately. It was the cruelest military decision Han Jaiwu had ever made. Billions of humans took shelter in underground bunkers designed decades earlier for nuclear war. The bunkers had never been meant to sustain entire populations for extended periods. Food ran short. Water supplies contaminated. Medical facilities overflowed with casualties. But, humanity endured. They had survived ice ages and plagues and world wars. They would survive this too. They had to believe that, or they would go insane. Admiral Cho Yuna commanded a strike force that attacked a massive Valkyrie supply convoy near Mars. Her ships emerged from hiding positions among the Martian moons, launching every weapon they carried in a coordinated strike. 15 supply ships exploded, their cargoes of food, ammunition, and fuel scattering into space. The Valkyrie escort vessels tried to respond, but Yuna's forces vanished back into the debris fields before they could be targeted. General Kim Tae-hyun's ground forces operated from hidden bases throughout the asteroid belt. They converted mining facilities into military strongholds, turning industrial equipment into weapons of war. When Valkyrie ships approached to investigate what appeared to be abandoned stations, Tae-hyun soldiers boarded them using stolen Valkyrie airlocks. The close-quarters battles were brutal and savage. No quarter was given. No mercy shown. Dar. Kong Myri's biological weapon was finally ready for deployment. The pathogen was designed to spread through Valkyrie environmental systems, targeting their unique physiology. It wouldn't kill quickly, but it would cause intense pain, fever, and hallucinations. She loaded the samples onto automated drones and launched them toward the Valkyrie garrison on Europa. Within 48 hours, every Valkyrie soldier on that moon was incapacitated, screaming in agony as their own bodies betrayed them. The psychological impact rippled through the Valkyrie fleet. Soldiers who had never known fear began to understand what it meant to be hunted. They wore their environmental suits constantly, terrified of invisible threats. They refused to board captured human stations, afraid of what might be waiting. The confidence that had carried them through 47 conquests evaporated like morning mist. Specialist Bae Hyun-woo achieved his greatest victory deep in cyberspace where no one could see the battle. He had spent months infiltrating Valkyrie communication networks, learning their protocols, understanding their command structure. Now he broadcast footage of humanity's resistance directly into the Dominion's empire-wide network. Every conquered species saw humans fighting against impossible odds. They saw human ships ramming Valkyrie vessels. They saw human soldiers choosing death over slavery. The uprisings began on 17 different worlds simultaneously. Subjugated species that had lived under Valkyrie rule for generations suddenly rose in rebellion. They sabotaged factories, attacked garrisons, and destroyed communication centers. The Valkyrie Dominion, which had seemed invincible for 1,000 years, found itself fighting civil wars across its entire territory. Supreme Commander Forlak was forced to divert resources from the Earth conquest to suppress the rebellions. But Forlak refused to abandon his campaign against humanity. He had committed too much, lost too many ships, suffered too much humiliation. He made a decision that would determine the fate of both species. He recalled every available Valkyrie warship to Sol System. Supply ships, patrol vessels, reserve fleets, everything. He would throw the entire military might of the Dominion at Earth and crush humanity once and for all. Fleet Admiral Han Jaiwoo watched 300 Valkyrie warships gather near Jupiter and knew his moment had come. For 6 months, while Earth suffered under bombardment, human forces had been preparing the solar system itself as a weapon. Thousands of autonomous war drones had been hidden throughout the system, waiting for activation codes. Nuclear mines had been seeded in apparently empty space, positioned along the most likely approach vectors. And the relativistic kill vehicles, asteroids accelerated to near-light speed months ago, were finally approaching their targets. The trap was ready. Han Jaiwoo sent a single transmission to all human forces. Execute Protocol Final Stand. Make them remember us. The Battle of Seoul began when the first relativistic kill vehicle struck a Valkyrie battleship. The asteroid was small, barely 10 meters across, but it was moving at 30% of light speed. The impact released more energy than a nuclear weapon. The battleship simply ceased to exist, vaporized in a fraction of a second. Before the Valkyrie could react, 17 more kill vehicles arrived, each one destroying another ship. Supreme Commander Forlak realized too late that he had fallen into a trap. His fleet was positioned exactly where the humans wanted it, concentrated in a kill zone that humanity had spent 6 months preparing. The autonomous drones activated simultaneously, swarming from hiding positions among asteroids and moons. Nuclear mines detonated in carefully choreographed sequences, each explosion driving Valkyrie ships toward other mines. Admiral Cho Yuna led her second fleet in a direct assault on the Valkyrie command vessels. Her ships were outnumbered 5-1, but they fought with desperate fury. She remembered the images of Earth burning, the cities reduced to craters, the billions dead. Every weapon fired was revenge. Every ship destroyed was justice. General Kim Tae-hyun's ground forces launched boarding operations against any Valkyrie vessel that survived the initial assault. They fought through corridors and compartments, clearing ships room by room. The battles were savage and personal, fought with firearms and blades when ammunition ran out. Many of Tae-hyun's soldiers died, but they took Valkyrie soldiers with them. Dr. Kong Myri watched the battle from her laboratory bunker deep beneath Earth's surface. She had created weapons that terrified her, violated every principle she believed in. But, as she watched Valkyrie ships burning in the void, she felt no regret. They had come to her world. They had killed her friends. They had murdered children. Whatever humanity had done to them, they had earned. The battle lasted 48 hours. In that time, the Valkyrie Dominion lost 283 warships. Only 17 vessels escaped, fleeing into hyperspace with damaged engines and traumatized crews. Supreme Commander Forlak died when his flagship was rammed by a human destroyer crewed by volunteers who had lost everything in the bombardment. Their final transmission was broadcast across all frequencies. For Captain Lee Doyen. For Luna. For Earth. We don't yield. We don't break. We burn. When the last Valkyrie ship vanished from human sensors, silence fell across Sol System. Fleet Admiral Han Jiwoo stood on his bridge, staring at the tactical display that showed the debris of hundreds of ships floating among the planets. They had won. Against impossible odds, despite suffering unimaginable losses, humanity had defeated the Valkyrie invasion. But, the victory was hollow. Earth lay in ruins below him, its cities destroyed, its oceans poisoned, its atmosphere choked with smoke and debris. 3 billion humans were dead. Most of human civilization was shattered beyond recognition. They had won the battle, but they had paid a price that would take generations to recover from. Ambassador Park Soo-jin broadcast a message to every surviving human across the solar system. Her voice was tired, aged beyond her years by what she had witnessed. The Valkyrie are broken. Their empire is falling. We have survived. But, we must never forget what we did to survive. We must never forget what we became. The devastation was total. But, humanity endured. The Battle of Seoul ended, but, Fleet Admiral Han Jiwoo did not stop. Against the UN's direct orders, against the pleas of civilian leaders who begged him to come home and help with reconstruction, he took 50 warships and left human space. These were volunteer vessels, crewed by men and women who had nothing left to lose. Their families were dead. Their homes were destroyed. All they had left was vengeance, and Han Jiwoo would give it to them. The Human Expeditionary Force, as they called themselves, hunted down every remaining Valkyrie military asset they could find. They tracked the 17 ships that escaped Sol System and destroyed 16 of them. They attacked Valkyrie outposts, supply depots, and communication stations. They showed no mercy because none had been shown to Earth. For 3 years, they waged a campaign of total destruction against anything bearing Valkyrie markings. Back in Sol System, the work of rebuilding began. Admiral Cho Yuna took command of the reconstruction effort, converting weapons factories back into civilian production facilities. She coordinated with colony governors on Mars and the asteroid settlements to share resources. Food was rationed carefully. Medical supplies distributed based on need rather than location. Every surviving human worked together because they had no choice. Unity wasn't a political ideal anymore. It was survival. Earth itself was barely recognizable. The kinetic bombardment had altered weather patterns, creating massive storms that raged for months. The oceans were contaminated with debris from destroyed cities. 3 billion corpses needed to be dealt with, a task so overwhelming that many were simply left where they fell. Admiral Yuna established quarantine zones around the worst-hit areas and focused reconstruction efforts on regions that could be salvaged. Dr. Kong Myri emerged from her laboratory bunker 3 months after the battle ended. She had been working on biological countermeasures, developing treatments for radiation sickness and chemical exposure that plagued survivors. But, when she finally walked on Earth's surface and saw the devastation, she broke down. All her knowledge, all her brilliance, and she hadn't been able to prevent this. She had only been able to make the enemy hurt too. She visited the memorial sites being established in every surviving settlement. Names carved on stone walls, so many names that some walls stretched for kilometers. She found the names of her colleagues from the 1st Contact Division, all killed when Valkyrie weapons destroyed the UN headquarters. She touched the carved letters and wondered if creating weapons of biological horror made her a hero or a monster. Ambassador Park Soo-jin, who had survived the bombardment in a reinforced bunker beneath Geneva, traveled to what remained of the world's capitals. She met with survivors, listened to their stories, and tried to offer hope when she felt none herself. She had been a diplomat once, someone who believed problems could be solved through negotiation and compromise. The Valkyrie had taught her that some enemies couldn't be reasoned with. Some threats had to be destroyed completely. The Valkyrie Dominion collapsed faster than anyone expected. With their best fleets destroyed and Supreme Commander Forlak dead, the Empire lost its ability to suppress rebellion. The 17 conquered worlds that had risen during the Battle of Seoul were joined by dozens more. Species that had lived under Valkyrie rule for centuries suddenly found themselves free. Some established democratic governments. Others descended into civil war. But, all of them remembered that humans had shown them resistance was possible. Delegations from the former Valkyrie subject species began arriving at Sol System 6 months after the battle. They came carefully, broadcasting peaceful intentions from the outer system and requesting permission to approach Earth. Admiral Cho Yuna, now serving as acting military governor of Earth, met with them personally. She listened to their gratitude, their offers of alliance, their requests for help rebuilding their own worlds. "We watched you fight," one delegation leader told her. "We watched you sacrifice everything to remain free. You inspired us. You showed us that even the mightiest empire can fall if enough people refuse to yield." Yuna looked at the alien diplomat with tired eyes. "We paid for that inspiration with 3 billion lives. I hope you never have to pay such a price for your freedom." But, not all the galaxy's reactions were positive. Advanced civilizations that had observed the war from a safe distance sent their own delegations. These were not congratulatory visits. They were fact-finding missions. They wanted to understand what humans were, what made them so dangerous, and whether they posed a threat to galactic stability. General Kim Tae-hyun, who had been promoted to head of planetary defense, met with these delegations in underground bunkers that doubled as command centers. He showed them nothing of Earth's remaining military capabilities. He answered their questions with careful neutrality. But, he made sure they understood one thing clearly. Humanity would never be conquered. Never again. Specialist Bae Hyunwoo continued his cyber warfare operations, but his targets had changed. Instead of attacking Valkyrie networks, he now monitored communication throughout nearby space. He watched for any signs of new threats, any species that might consider humanity weak after the devastation Earth had suffered. He found several civilizations discussing exactly that possibility. Bae made sure they received detailed recordings of the Battle of Seoul. The discussion stopped. Fleet Admiral Han Jaiwoo returned to Seoul System after 3 years of hunting Valkyrie remnants. His 50 ships had been reduced to 31. His crew members were scarred physically and psychologically by years of constant warfare. But, they had completed their mission. Every significant Valkyrie military asset within 50 light-years had been destroyed. The empire that once ruled 47 worlds was gone, reduced to scattered refugees hiding on forgotten outposts. When Han Jaiwoo's flagship entered Earth orbit, he looked down at his homeworld and barely recognized it. New cities were rising from the ashes of the old. Massive terraforming projects were underway to restore the atmosphere and oceans. Green zones were spreading slowly, life returning to dead areas. It would take generations to fully heal, but Earth was healing. He met with Admiral Cho Yuna in what had been Seoul, now a sprawling reconstruction zone. She looked older than her years, exhausted by the endless work of rebuilding civilization. They stood together on a hill overlooking the city and watched construction crews working by floodlight in the darkness. Was it worth it? Yuna asked quietly. 3 billion dead. Earth nearly destroyed. Was keeping our freedom worth that price? Han Jaiwu was silent for a long time before answering. Ask the people building those buildings. Ask the children being born in the settlements. Ask the former slaves of the Valkyrie Empire who are free because we refuse to surrender. They'll tell you if it was worth it. The Free Worlds Alliance was established 1 year after the Battle of Seoul. 23 species that had been freed from Valkyrie rule joined together in a mutual defense pact. Humanity, despite being the most devastated member, was invited to lead the alliance. Ambassador Park Soo-jin represented Earth at the founding ceremony, held on a neutral space station. We did not seek war, she told the assembled delegates. We did not desire conquest. But, when forced to fight, we fought without mercy and without restraint. We will share our technology, our resources, and our knowledge freely with all alliance members. But, we will also share our military doctrine. We will ensure that no species ever faces conquest alone again. Earth erected a monument in high orbit, visible from the surface with the naked eye. It was a simple structure, a ring of metal surrounding a crystal that reflected sunlight like a star. Carved into the metal in every known language was a message for any species that might visit Sol system in the future. Here lies humanity. We did not seek war. We did not desire conquest. But, when forced to fight, we fought without mercy and without restraint. We sacrificed billions to remain free. Come in peace, and we will welcome you as friends. Come in war, and we will give you devastation absolute. This is our promise. This is our warning. Remember Earth. Dr. Kong Myri stood in a newly built laboratory 10 years after the Battle of Seoul. She was training the next generation of scientists, teaching them xenobiology and medicine. But, she always included one lesson that wasn't in any textbook. She showed them recordings of the biological weapons she had created, the suffering they caused, the moral price she paid for using them. I created horrors to save our species, she told her students. I would do it again if necessary. But, I want you to understand what that choice costs. Knowledge is not just power. It's responsibility. Use it wisely. Commander Han Jaiwu, now Supreme Commander of the Alliance Defense Force, trained officers from 23 different species in human military doctrine. He taught them tactics that had never been seen in galactic warfare. Ambush techniques. Psychological operations. The willingness to sacrifice tactical advantages for strategic victory. And, most importantly, the understanding that civilians were never acceptable targets. The Valkyrie made one critical mistake, he told his students. They targeted Luna civilians thinking it would break our morale. Instead, it united us in rage. Never give your enemy a reason to fight without restraint. Because some species, like humans, will take you at your word. General Kim Tae-hyun watched Earth's population grow again as colonies sent people home. New cities spread across continents that had been burned and poisoned. Children played in parks that had been craters a decade before. The scars remained, but life was returning. He walked through the streets of New Seoul and saw people laughing, arguing, falling in love. Ordinary life, miraculous in its normalcy. Specialist Bae Hyun-woo, now heading Alliance Intelligence, monitored the galaxy constantly. Several aggressive civilizations had notably changed their expansion policies after reviewing Earth's war records. The footage of human ships ramming Valkyrie vessels, of soldiers fighting to the death rather than surrendering, of an entire species willing to sacrifice everything for freedom, had made an impression. Humanity's reputation preceded them now. Ambassador Park Sujin kept a memento on her desk in the Alliance Council chambers. A piece of debris from the UEDF destroyer Indomitable, recovered from the wreckage of the Valkyrie flagship. She touched it every morning before beginning her work. Captain Lee Doyen and his crew had shown humanity what sacrifice meant. She would not let their deaths be meaningless. 20 years after the Battle of Seoul, Earth celebrated its first day of complete atmospheric restoration. The oceans were clean. The forests had returned. The population had reached 5 billion again. The scars remained, but they were healing. Humanity had survived its test by fire. The aliens had expected Earth to yield. They had expected fear, surrender, and submission. What they got instead was a lesson the galaxy would never forget. Humanity could be peaceful. Humanity could be compassionate. Humanity could be reasonable and diplomatic and kind. But, when threatened, when pushed too far, when forced to fight for survival, humanity became something else entirely. They became a species that would sacrifice everything, burn their own worlds, and wage war without mercy or restraint. They became a species that turned devastation into a weapon and wielded it with terrible precision. The Valkyrie brought devastation to Earth. Humanity returned it 1,000-fold and made sure the galaxy remembered.